There are 3 photography mistakes that are so nefarious they plague beginners and professionals alike, often without them even knowing. Unfortunately, I am speaking from experience here, and in this video I want to share with you what these 3 mistakes are, because if you are making them, they're almost certainly holding you back. So for today's purposes, we're gonna boil things down, and by that I mean we're going to pretend that we are a chef. We are chefs now. And what do you want to do now that you are a chef? What kind of food do you want to make? Well, food is your art form. You want to create something excellent, something maybe even worthy of a Michelin star to demonstrate your culinary prowess. As photographers, this is how many of us start. We have grand ambitions to create stunning, beautiful imagery, art that communicates and expresses something inside. But that requires a lot of learning, talent, patience, trial, error. Sounds hard. What if I could just make something that everybody already knows and loves, like a hamburger? And so what starts out as this grand ambition to create something portfolio worthy, that is uniquely yours, that communicates something about who you are and the way you see the world around you, that gets reduced to something palatable that people already like. If you're not quite following me, what I'm talking about is chasing trends. Since the advent of social media, chasing trends has become one of the primary ways that people get into photography. When I really dove into photography 9 years ago, the trend was these really big, dramatic landscape images with a small person for scale. Photographers, myself included, would travel far and wide to recreate the same shot that we saw on the internet. I mean, if I'm in Zion National Park, of course I want to capture that photo of the watcher above the Virgin River. It's a beautiful shot. But no matter how many times I do, it's just going to be another hamburger. And there's nothing wrong with hamburgers. There's nothing wrong with chasing trends or recreating famous shots. There's certainly a place for all of that. But I think the real problem here is that it's a slippery slope. We start out with ambitions to create something that is uniquely our own, but there is this lingering pressure to create something that people are gonna like. And getting recognized for our work is deeply gratifying. And then we see this tsunami of validation that people are getting online for doing the cool, trendy thing. But if we shift our focus entirely to chasing the validation that comes with creating the hyper-palatable food, the trendy stuff, we outsource our creativity to the trend and neglect to explore it for ourselves. All of my favorite things I've created have been the ones where I didn't try and recreate something else. I just surrendered to the process and said, well, let's see how it goes, because it's the wonky, weird, unique, creative experiments that get the Michelin star, not the hamburger. But there's another way that we're giving away our creative power. So there's this chef, not you, someone else, and they've got a bit of a problem. He can never poach an egg just right. He tried a few times, but threw his hands up in frustration until he saw an ad for this egg poaching machine. You just put in the eggs and it'll poach it for you perfectly. Amazing. So he gets it, eggs are coming out great. But then his dough, he doesn't know, he just can't knead it properly or something. And so he gets a bread machine. And this goes on and on. He gets frustrated or uninspired and just keeps buying appliances to solve his problems. And his food's getting better. People are giving him compliments saying how talented he is. But then he goes on vacation with his family, and one night he's supposed to make all of them dinner, but he is now naked without all of his appliances. So he fumbles through the creation of dinner, and it is just a disaster, because wherever he had a skill deficiency, he decided to just bandage over it with a purchase instead of figuring out how to do it correctly. Now, I know that this sounds ridiculous from the outside, but the ridiculous thing is that this is exactly what so many of us do as photographers. If you think of the best chef in the world, are they a great chef because they have the best appliances? No. What makes them a great chef is that they could probably whip up something incredible with whatever they got their hands on. Sure, they need the essential tools as any artist does, but it's not about what they have. It's about what they do with it. Now, I'll admit it's a tricky time to be a photographer. There are a lot of products out there with large marketing budgets behind them that are designed to make you think that the solution to your problem is to purchase a new tool. In the beginning of a photography journey, you usually don't have a ton of money, so you kind of just have to figure it out with what you've got, which I think is great. But as we improve, as we have more resources, as we get better at photography and we can justify throwing some more money at it, And maybe as our work has gotten a little complacent, a little bit stale, maybe we're not pushing ourselves as much as we used to creatively, that's when those off-the-shelf solutions start looking better and better. Pushing myself out of my comfort zone, trying something new, creatively challenging myself, those things are hard. But buying a new camera, that's easy. It'll be here in 2 days, and that will totally solve my problem. Or at least bandage over it for a little bit. Now, as a lover of cameras, a lover of gear, and the things that they allow me to do, I know firsthand it can be a tough pill to swallow to realize that the problem is actually you. The new camera, lens, filter, whatever is not gonna fix it. I think we actually do ourselves a disservice by thinking that the gear is gonna make our work better. If we think that the new camera is gonna solve our problem, then the logic behind that thinking says that the problem is external. It is outside of myself. It is because of my circumstances or my things. And that's a pretty disempowering story. It says that you can't fix it on your own. It takes your power away. Now, there is an empowering story that we can choose, but it comes with a little bit of brutal honesty. The story says, the reason your work is stale is your fault. The reason your photos aren't as good as you want them to be is because you haven't worked at it hard enough. And the reason that Chris Burkhardt's photos look like that and yours don't is not because he shoots on the latest Sony, but because he's just simply been doing it longer than you. That anything you're dissatisfied with in your photography is your fault. But it is also entirely within your control to improve. You've just got to try. Okay, now this one is super sneaky. If you've been shooting for a while, this one really creeps up on you. Imagine you're a serious coffee snob. We're no longer chefs, we're coffee snobs. This should be a lot easier for you photographers to relate to. I'm guilty too, guys, it's okay. You obsess over crafting the perfect coffee. You ensure that the beans are ground to just the right size, you weigh them precisely, the water is at the perfect temperature, you pull the shot and you've executed everything perfectly. It was like music. But then you take a sip and it tastes like shit. Why? Because despite perfecting every technical aspect of the brewing process, the only coffee we had available were these stale Folgers beans from 5 years ago. Now, I don't care how good of a barista you are, I don't care if you've mastered your camera settings inside and out, bad stuff in equals bad stuff out. You cannot polish a turd. Now, I'm not saying that you're taking shitty photos, it's worse than that. I'm saying you might be taking okay photos. The great thing about shitty images is that you realize real quickly, oh wow, that's bad. I've got to do something about that. But when you're just kind of taking the same photos you've been taking and they're all right, you know, that breeds stagnation. There's no catalyst for change. There's nothing to spur you to grow. Because after a while in photography, we can kind of just fall into a groove. We start seeing things a certain way, we compose images a certain way, and if we don't change it, the coffee ends up getting stale. Now, I think that this is more of a personal realization than anything. I mean, I don't look at anybody else's photos and go, that work is stale, but I sure as hell look at my own and go, why does this feel the same? Why does this not feel like I'm doing anything new or exciting? Why I can taste the fact that I haven't been pushing myself. And the tricky thing is that people will still compliment them. They'll say, oh, this is such a great photo. Cody, you're so talented. Cody, you're so cool. Cody, I love you. I wish I were as cool as you. Nobody's ever said that. But regardless of what they think, I still know that I'm dissatisfied with it. I've been doing this a while. I can crank dials. I can, you know, close one eye and press buttons like a motherfucker. I'm really great at that. I can nail settings, but if my compositions aren't good, oof. Because photography is essentially the art of arranging elements beautifully within a frame. And if we're not improving our ability to compose, then we have by definition stagnated. I don't care how good your settings were. If the photo's not interesting, the perfect exposure isn't gonna make it interesting. You're probably beginning to notice that these are all mistakes that I have made. These are reminders to myself of what I want to work on, and by stating them out loud, I'm holding myself accountable. And by sharing them with you, I'm hoping that you can avoid them as well. Now, we can all absorb this info and think that we're on the right path, but how do we know if we actually suck? Like, how can we be sure? How do I know if I'm actually talented or if I'm just relying on trends, cool locations, gear, whatever it might be as a crutch? This is a question I sought to answer for myself in a little experiment. And I'm not gonna spoil it for you, but if you wanna see me try and figure out if I'm actually as good of a photographer as I hoped I am, then check out this video.